Council. Yes, the Chief Appraiser's presentation is part of the Land Development
I don't
Code
know that
briefing.
your microphone's on.
Oh, there it is. Okay, yes, the presentation was part of the Land Development Code briefing, but to your point, while the Chief Appraiser is here, it would certainly be good to take this opportunity to answer questions, and I believe Mayra had maybe just some quick overview of briefing that she wanted to talk about as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. First, I just want to preface it by saying that from the appraisal district's perspective, we do not know what the impact of the land development code is going to be. We're going to have to wait and let the market tell us what it does to appraised values. So it is too early for us to say whether it would be a negative or a positive in terms of the impact on appraisals. We're going to have to wait and let the market tell us what the impact is going to be.
Okay. And that's the general rule. I think the question that people are asking in particular is if I have a homestead
Yes.
and the tract next to me was a homestead tract but now can be developed into a triplex and someone buys it to turn it into a triplex, will that impact the ad valorem valuation of my property?
Okay.
For my
So
homestead?
any property that has a homestead exemption that may be upzoned, as long as it's still used for residential purposes and still maintains the homestead, the highest and best use will always be considered to be a homestead. If the property is sold and it is converted and it becomes a triplex, then it comes out of the pool of properties that we compare for other single-family residential properties, and it goes into the pool of triplexes. So we compare single-family to other single-family, and we compare triplexes and duplexes to other triplexes and duplexes.
Okay. If someone goes and buys the property next door, it was a homestead, the homestead person sold it to somebody else who buys it, pays a lot for it, doesn't maintain it as a homestead, and makes it clear an indication that they're buying it in order to be able to redevelop it or convert it into a triplex, even though it hasn't happened yet. Is that a comparable sale that would be used to value my homestead property
So
next door?
what we do when we look at our data of sales available for us to analyze is we're always going to look at it, and if it is anything that is a sale that is more than two standard deviations outside of the norm, it gets flagged as an outlier. So really, really high sales and really, really low sales get flagged as outliers. We're looking for things that are comparable, that make sense with in comparison to the other sales that we see within the neighborhood.
Okay. And then beyond that, if it's not to factor off, you're looking at the highest and best use. So
Yes.
you're going to compare homestead properties to properties that were bought for homestead properties.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
So you look at the highest and best use, what it was bought to be intended to be used for. If somebody buys the property next to me, hasn't made it into a triplex yet, but the evidence would indicate that they bought it for the purpose of turning it into a triplex. That's the kind of information or data that you would consider to decide whether or not that's a sale that could be used.
Yes, we're going to look at the highest and best use of the property and make that determination. Now, sometimes people will purchase properties and there is no indication and it's unknowable by the appraisal district. That's when that other secondary test comes in. Does it appear to be an outlier when you take it in consideration with the total population of sales that we have that we're analyzing?
That's kind of like the stopgap. I mean, to the degree that someone buys it for a homestead, clearly it can be used. They're using it as a homestead. If they're buying it for some other purpose, that becomes a fact
Yes.
issue. Certainly a property owner would be able to come in and say, this was purchased by John, and here's the other 8 times John has bought properties and turned them into triplexes. He's not living here. There's no longer a homestead exemption. Therefore, the appraisal board, you can't use this because it's clear that his highest and best use was different from that. That's the kind of information that the appraisal district would take into account.
That's information we would take into account. And sometimes that's going to be information that's provided to us by people other than the property owner. But we appreciate when that kind of information is brought to our attention.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, Leslie?